The Nintendo Switch 2 is undeniably on its way, most likely sometime in early 2025 at this point. And considering from all the rumors and reports out there that it'll be a next-gen console that iterates on the current Switch concept, rather than being something completely different, it's likely to introduce a number of improvements over the current Nintendo Switch. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I wanted to go over 5 features this next-gen machine will likely implement. Of course, there are more than 5, but these are what I feel the most anticipated features from both myself and also most other Nintendo fans that I've seen. Of course, as a disclosure, I do have to mention that this video is by no means suggesting that anything is fact, since nothing has actually been announced yet. It's simply an amalgamation of many opinions I've seen all over the internet, as well as my own. So, with that being said, let's just jump right in. Number 5. Nintendo's central gimmick. Yes, we all know Nintendo at this point. We know they like their gimmicks. We know that most, if not all, Nintendo systems at this point, especially in recent memory, has had their fair share of gimmicks and also a central gimmick or central hook, if you will. I made a previous video discussing what potential gimmicks Nintendo could implement in the next Nintendo Switch. And in that video, I quoted the word gimmick because I felt like it wasn't really an accurate word to describe the features of the Nintendo Switch at this point. When you look at the Switch, when we think about the Nintendo Switch, we think about the main hook, that it can switch between handheld and home console. To me personally, that's not really a gimmick, it's more of something that actually works. It's a central hook. Therefore, I'm really hesitant to use the word gimmick, but nonetheless, we do know that Nintendo still likes to introduce little things here and there like HD Rumble, like motion controls. These are things that many people associate with the word gimmick. So therefore, just for the sake of it, I'm going to use that word here, but mostly in quotes. So again, going back to that previous video that I made, I had a number of ideas for what Nintendo could potentially do for their next console. Could they potentially reintroduce dual screen? Could they introduce motion controls once again? Absolutely. These are all things that are very likely. Knowing Nintendo, this is something that they could totally go back to. Will we see an improved version of HD Rumble in this next system? It's 100% possible. But when I talk about a central hook or central gimmick, I mean something that differentiates itself from the current Nintendo Switch as we know it. Of course, Nintendo Switch's main hook is the fact that it can switch. I don't think that's going to change for this next console. Again, like I mentioned before, I think this is going to be an iterative console, not necessarily a revolution that'll change everything. I think it's going to take that same central hook that you can switch between TV and portable mode and go from there. I don't think Nintendo's going to go too far beyond that when it comes to a central hook. But nonetheless, it's interesting to think about because I do think Nintendo will introduce something slightly new to differentiate this system from the previous one. So what could that thing be? Well, these are just little ideas that I have, but nonetheless it's interesting to think about because Nintendo has always been known for these kinds of things, and so I'm very excited to see what they could come up with next. Number 4. Improved UI/menu functionality. So this is a big one for me personally. Even though it's only number 4 on the list, believe it or not, it's actually a pretty big one for me personally. I would like to see an improved user interface for this thing. Of course, the current Nintendo Switch's user interface isn't anything bad necessarily. In fact, visually, it's clean, it's simple, and it gets the job done. But when we go back to the Wii U, or the Wii, we see that Nintendo has been far more creative in this aspect. And we're just not really seeing that with the current Switch. It's very simple, it's very plain, and really there are only 2 themes, and that's another thing entirely, but that's something that I'd like to see in the future system as well. Can we get some more themes? Please? But nonetheless, I do think that the UI could be improved, absolutely. Is there anything particularly wrong with it now in terms of its visual design? Not necessarily, but it could absolutely be improved. Now let's talk about the menu functionality, the functionality itself of the user interface and the various menus. When we look at the eShop, we can see just how laggy it can be and how it's not as optimized as I personally feel it should be. I think we've seen better implementations of the eShop on the Nintendo 3DS, on the Wii U. Even the Wii Shop channel was a little bit smoother to navigate. The current eShop as we know it suffers from a lot of lag and suffers from a lot of slowness. It's not very fast. My desire for an improved UI is also further driven by the fact that I've seen countless fan designs made by fans that look far better than anything that Nintendo has come up with thus far. So that's something that I'd like to see. I'd like to see a much more creative, better design, and of course the music. Where is the music? Or if not music, can we at least have some kind of background noise, some kind of background ambiance of some sort? But yes, it would be nice if they brought back the menu music and of course the eShop music. That would be cool. Number 3, improve the Joy-Cons. Now this is a big one for a lot of people, including myself. In fact, I feel quite ashamed for only having it at number 3 rather than number 1 or 2. But nonetheless, I do think this is a very, very important point. It needs to be addressed. The Joy-Cons need to be fixed. They need to be fixed and they need to be improved. So for the next system, I propose no more Joy-Con drift. Let's not have any more Joy-Con drift moving forward. And let's also improve the overall feel of the Joy-Cons. I mean, as they are right now, I haven't heard too many complaints about how they feel in your hand. Although for me personally, I've rarely ever used the Joy-Cons by themselves in my hand without any kind of peripheral or the Joy-Con grip or anything like that. At this point, I always used the Pro Controller. I never used the Joy-Cons. And even in handheld mode, I never quite felt like the Joy-Cons were as comfortable as they really could have been. So I would like them to improve the overall build and make them a bit more ergonomic, make them a bit more comfortable in the hand. I know it of course differs between everyone because everyone has different sized hands. Maybe for kids they're not going to be nearly as bothered by this. But of course, most people playing the Switch at this point aren't actually kids, believe it or not. So I think that Joy-Cons that have a bit more of a better shape to them, something that can fit more snugly in people's hands, I think that would be worth exploring. Number 2, backwards compatibility. I know. This is something for many people that would have actually been number 1. I know that. I'm completely aware that this is something that is, for a lot of people on the internet, this is something that is on the top of their lists, backwards compatibility. And of course, for the most part, I absolutely agree. I think backwards compatibility is incredibly important for this next system to achieve. I think that if they did not have backwards compatibility, it would be catastrophic even. To have a lot of people have to rebuild their Nintendo Switch libraries on this new console, whereas having backwards compatibility of any kind will simplify that process. If they had full backwards compatibility in which you can just simply insert your Nintendo Switch cards and you can play Switch games on it, perhaps even with like added features like an improved frame rate or improved resolution or improved performance overall. But even if that wasn't the case, even if we didn't get those improvement features, just simply being able to play our existing Switch library on this next system by inserting your card, or perhaps having your Nintendo eShop account transfer over, which Nintendo has discussed, that it may be possible to be able to play your Nintendo Switch games on the system simply by downloading them if you have the same account, if you have your accounts linked between the original Switch and the Switch 2. So the easier Nintendo can make the process for customers, the better it's going to be, the better everyone's experience is going to be. And not just that, but having backwards compatibility immensely improves the overall game library of this new system. Think about it. This new system, when it comes out, it's going to have a limited supply of games at launch. Of course, it's going to build over time, but at launch, it's not going to have nearly as many games as the Switch. Therefore, anyone who doesn't have a Switch, or anyone who has Switch games they still want to play, they have this new device, they can still play them on this new device. Therefore, I do think that the backwards compatibility is incredibly important for multiple reasons. Number 1, power. Yes, that's right, you heard me. The number 1 most anticipated feature for me, and of course for many other people, is power. Power is the most important factor and may even be the most important differentiating factor of this new device. Even for the sake of comparing this new device to its predecessor, the original Nintendo Switch, I think power is the biggest thing you could use to differentiate these two systems. This is a next-gen system, And while you could say the Switch is a next-gen system from the Wii U, which it is, the Switch is the successor to the Wii U, it is the next-gen system from Nintendo back when it launched in 2017, it didn't have that power jump. But what it lacked in power, it made up for in concept, and that was the fact that you could switch. You could take the system on the go or play it in the dock and play on your big TV. That was the central hook. That was the big differentiating factor between the Wii U and the Switch. So the Switch didn't need power to differentiate it from the previous console because its concept itself was far, far different in many ways. Of course, there were some similarities, but for the most part, the Switch is quite different from the Wii U. It's sufficiently different, and especially in terms of branding, it's completely different. Nintendo Switch branding is nothing like the way the Wii U is branded or even advertised. They're two very different systems in that regard. But with this next system, the Nintendo Switch 2, again with rumors and reports suggesting that it's going to be iterative, as in, it's going to be essentially a Switch, but a next-gen Switch. It's going to take that same concept, you can take it with you on the go or leave it in the dock and play on your TV. It's going to take that same Switch concept, but make it more powerful. Therefore, power has to be the big differentiating factor in this case. It has to be a sufficient jump in power. Otherwise, what else is it going to do? It's simply going to be a Switch Pro at that point if it's not as big of a jump in power. It needs to be a big enough jump that it can truly be called a sequel, a successor system, the next-gen system. Because there's not much else Nintendo could go off at this point, especially if it is just iterating off a previous concept. It's not really innovating in its own way. But going back to that central hook or central gimmick point that I made earlier in the video, it's possible Nintendo could reveal or introduce something completely new, but it's unlikely that it's going to overshadow the central hook of being able to switch between handheld and home console mode. So, with all that being said, those are my 5 most anticipated Nintendo Switch 2 features. Did you guys agree or did you guys disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, I am looking forward to this system no matter what. I'm excited for what it'll potentially entail, for what it'll introduce, for the games that are coming out for it. I'm excited for all of it, and I hope you all are too. Thank you for watching and have a good one. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.